Today we will be going over how to create a table using SQL Server Management Studio. To create the table, we will be using the syntax used on the screen, saying create table, table name, variable type, followed by another variable, variable type. I'm using the term variable here, but essentially we're creating the columns and their variable types. When we're naming our table, we want to make sure the table name reflects the table's content and function, and we don't want to use spaces. Variable types that we can use, I'll be going over a few today. As for date types, I'll go over datetime, date, and time. Datetime is simply what it sounds like. It's a date and a time. A date stores just a date, and time stores a time. And you can see all of the specifics on the description on this screen, as well as the storage it requires. And then you can also just Google this or go to W3 Schools to see any specifics you're interested in. As for number types, I'll go over int first. So int is an integer. It's between this giant number here and this other giant number. And you can look up specifics for that with the internet once again. And then there's multiple types of integers such as tiny int, small int, and big int. Also, what we'll be using a lot for our table is float. It's simply a number. It's allowed to have decimal places, and this one's a pretty generic one. There are numerous other number types which you can also look up. As for string types, today I will go over char, varchar, nchar, and nvarchar. Char is basically a fixed width character string with n characters. So if you wanted to store char with 5 characters and say you were storing the string dog, it would store dog and then blank blank. As for varchar with n characters, it's a variable with character string. So if you gave it the maximum of 5 characters, saying varchar 5, and you stored the string dog in it, it would just store dog. There would be no empty characters. As for nchar and nvarchar, these are basically the same except that you can use Unicode characters. It's really useful for other languages and strange characters. So I've pulled up the data here in Excel that is the same data we'll be working with in SQL Server Management Studio. I'm pulling this up so that you can get a sense of the variable types we'll be working with. Primarily we'll be using float to represent numbers. As you can see, there are lots of numbers. But we also have the choice of using char, as in for state. We could just do a fixed character length of char of 2. But just in case, I'm going to use nvarchar, allowing up to 255 characters. I'm aware this is excessive. I'm just trying to be safe with our table so we don't have to create it again. Here is the query we will use to create our table. I've already written it to save time in this video. So as you can see, we created a new offer ID with this syntax because the original table did not have a satisfactory primary key, which is simply a unique identifier. And this is once again where knowing your data is very useful because you would think that customer ID in this case would be the primary key, but the customer IDs actually repeat, so it is not a good ID, primary key. So we're going to create offer ID, and then we've chosen certain columns from the original table that we are interested in and assigned variable types. If you're unsure of what variable type you should use, you can look at the original table after you've imported it and see what the variable types are. They don't need to match up exactly. Char and nvarchar will be compatible, but I'm going to do that anyway. So just to show you how to do this, you'll come over to your database. We're working with Allstate, and find the table that you're pulling the data from. We're going to pull it from this table. You can click on columns, and then over here you can see what kind of data type it is. So A through G are all float, and that's what we did. Car value is nvarchar 255. Again, I have these matching, but you really don't need to do that necessarily. So I'm going to close this back up. Alright. Now we're ready to execute our query. So we're going to press execute. Commands completed successfully. So this is how we know that our table was created. So once you see this result, that means you're successful. If you get an error, I highly recommend Googling it. So as you can see, I titled this table ASDU 5399 underscore insurance offers. This just shows that it's the table I made, and this is describing it, insurance offers. I put in my identifier simply because this database is shared among a lot of people, and that way it's clear which table is mine. It's easy for me to find. That's all it is. So if we look over here, we'll see that our table isn't over here yet. We don't want to freak out. We're just going to click on tables and press refresh. So now we can see it's right here.